Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Welcome back to World 360. Today we're going to be talking about Libya, a war-torn country in northern Africa, and its secret links with Israel. Now, the civil war in Libya is complicated, mainly because apart from local militias, there are so many other countries that have a stake in the crisis. There are regional players like Egypt, UAE, and Turkey, and even Western players like the US, Russia, and even France. Even the Islamic State briefly gained a foothold, but it was defeated. The fact that Libya is oil-rich makes matters even more complicated. Libya has been in turmoil ever since the fall of Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, regarded by some as a dictator. The fall of his regime in 2011 was aided by a NATO bombing campaign. Gaddafi, who had ruled for 4 decades in Libya, was killed and dragged through the streets by his own people in 2011. And that year, US President Barack Obama rejoiced that it was a momentous day for Libya now that tyranny had fallen. Fast forward to 2021 and the situation in Libya is far from momentous. In simple terms, there are 2 governments vying for power, one in the west and one in the east. The one in the west is the Tripoli-based government of the National Accord, or the GNA, which is formally recognized by the United Nations. It is currently led by Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Dabeiba. Italy, the former colonial power in Libya, as well as Turkey and Qatar, support the Tripoli government. And so does the US on official terms, but we'll get back to that. Now, the rival administration in the east is led by warlord General Khalifa Haftar, who commands the so-called Libyan National Army. Haftar has launched offensives on the Tripoli-based government many times in 2016 and 2019. Haftar enjoys support from Egypt, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and secretly France, though France disputes this. Russia also provides support to Haftar. If you remember in episode 4, we had spoken about how Russia has been accused of using the shadowy Wagner group to send foreign fighters into African countries like Mali to revive its Soviet-era influence in Africa. The same seems to be happening in Libya. Now, here's the thing about the US. Though it had traditionally backed the Tripoli-based government, things changed in 2017 after US President Donald Trump came into power. According to a TRT report, the US seemed to have shifted their position in support of Haftar by saying he had a significant role in fighting terrorism and securing Libya's oil resources, following a phone conversation between President Trump and the warlord. It's also worth mentioning that Haftar used to be a Gaddafi ally, but after he was disavowed by the Libyan dictator, he found asylum in the United States, and from there, with the CIA support and financial aid, a few unsuccessful attempts were made to overthrow Gaddafi. The TRT report earlier mentioned also says many argue that Trump's attempt to change the US position was a result of lobbying by the UAE, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. It is still not clear what the Biden administration's strategy is in Libya, but the Tripoli government hopes Biden will push on the withdrawal of foreign forces, which includes the Russian Wagner Group's mercenaries and Turkish forces in the west of the country. Withdrawal of these forces are the prerequisite conditions for a ceasefire between the Tripoli government and Haftar's forces to come into force. The 2 sides agreed to the ceasefire last year, as well as a new unity government which was installed in March to prepare for national elections slated for 24th December. This move was seen as the best chance for peace in Libya in years. Now, there's one regional player left to talk about, Israel, which has escaped most publicity. However, last week, a private jet carrying Haftar's son Saddam allegedly made a pit stop in Israel for about 1.5 hours before continuing on to Libya. According to a report by Israeli newspaper Haaretz, Haftar and his son were seeking military and diplomatic assistance from Israel in exchange that if they ended up heading the national unity government post-elections in Libya, they will launch diplomatic ties with Jerusalem. It would be a big deal if Libya launched diplomatic ties with Israel, mainly because of the Palestine factor. When Gaddafi was in power in Libya, Israel became more interested in this country because of his support for Palestinian terror groups. The 2 countries maintained contacts primarily through Jewish businessmen of Libyan origin, and these contacts were in fact overseen by Gaddafi's son. At one point, the Israeli Foreign Ministry persuaded Gaddafi's son to drop his intention of sending a ship with humanitarian aid to Gaza. As part of the deal, Libya built dozens of prefabricated buildings in Gaza, and Israel released a number of Palestinian prisoners. A report by Turkish media house Anadolu Agency notes that Israel has secretly long supported Haftar against the UN-recognized government in Tripoli to achieve its security interests. But the reason this has been made a secret is to avoid embarrassing him before the Arab and Islamic public opinions. Let's not forget that Israel has already established ties with 4 Arab countries, with US mediation under Trump. Adding another one to its list is sure to make heads turn. Until then, let's see how the next month's elections in Libya pan out. Thank you so much for watching. This is Pia Krishnankutty for ThePrint. Do stay tuned. We'll be back soon with a brand new episode.